All right, we're going to wait a few minutes for all of our participants to hop on, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our menstrual movement event tonight. My name is Leela Garner, and I'm a sustainability coordinator in UVA's Office for Sustainability and one of the many folks who helped bring this conversation to life. Tonight, we will be diving into the empowering and vulnerable topic of periods. We hope to facilitate a safe and educational conversation around the accessibility, or in many cases, the inaccessibility of safe and affordable menstrual products. I would like to thank all of our event co-hosts, Protect Our Breasts at UVA, and the Maxine, Platzer, Lynn Women's Center, and our speakers from Women's Voices of the Earth, who you will be hearing from shortly. We would like to offer a few acknowledgements before we begin. First, please join me in acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians of the land we are on today, the Monacan people. I also wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that our panel is not an equitable representation of all folks that menstruate. This conversation is not just for cisgendered white women, but rather a community of all ages, races, and genders. This is our first attempt at organizing a conversation, and we welcome any feedback or any suggestions for our next time around. In particular, we would welcome hearing from people who are interested in speaking on future panels. You can email sustainability@virginia.edu to share any thoughts. I know we are all very well versed with Zoom meetings at this point, but we do have a few housekeeping tips to go over. We will be having a question and answer session in the latter half of the event, so feel free to ask a question at any point by using the Q&A button that should be in the bottom panel of your screen. We also will be sending a follow-up email with an event summary, the event recording, and links to various resources that will be mentioned tonight. And lastly, with generous funding from UVA's Equity and Environment Fund, we were able to procure 100 reusable menstrual cups to hand out to both UVA and community members. If you are interested in receiving a cup, please request one in the Google form that will be sent out tomorrow in the event summary email. We have 30 to share with attendees, and we'll use a raffle to select winners. A quick disclaimer, you must be in Charlottesville or have easy access to Charlottesville in order to receive one. And with that, I will pass it over to Emma and Sophia, our student organizers, to introduce themselves and our wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Leela. Hi, my name is Sophia McLean, and I'm the co-president of the UVA chapter of Protect Our Breasts alongside Emma Lynn. Protect Our Breasts is an educational advocacy organization focused on spreading awareness about environmental toxins found in everyday products that can lead to the development of health issues. We are thrilled to bring in expert speakers from Women's Voices of the Earth, a nonprofit aimed to eliminate toxic chemicals that harm our health and communities. Here's a quick introductory video about who they are and what they do.
Every year, we are targeted. Women are told we need these things for our health and beauty. The truth is, many of these products actually put our health at risk. Corporations have decided they know best. Trust us, they say. Safety is our top priority. While hiding spermicides in intimate wipes, allergens in tampons, cancer-causing formaldehyde in hair straighteners, and ingredients linked to reproductive harm in fragrance. We're not buying it. Women's Voices for the Earth is here to demand accountability. For 25 years, we've fought corporate interests, demanding they put people over profits. And now, cleaning and personal care manufacturers can't get away with hiding toxic ingredients. The toxic exposure risk from menstrual and intimate care products has become a mainstream health issue. And we've rallied in the halls of Congress and at the doorsteps of the world's largest corporations to ensure that women's health is a priority. There's no doubt we've come far and there's a lot to celebrate. But the monumental challenges that lie ahead go beyond the label. Untested chemicals continue to be added to products we use every day, and powerful interests still control what we put into our bodies and dump into our environment. The voices of those overburdened by toxic exposure, namely women of low-income communities, young, trans, and non-binary people, and especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color, continue to be neglected. And so the work continues. The fight continues. We must keep going because they will not stop. Our advocates are leading campaigns in every state of our nation and beyond to put an end to these harmful practices. We will not stop until unsafe products are gone from our shelves entirely. Because it's not just about the products we use, it's about agency, and it's about ensuring that all of us, regardless of gender, race, or income, can have the peace of mind that we won't be harmed by the products we use. So bring your voice, your person, and your power, and join us. Together, we will build a healthy future. Together, we are women's voices for the earth.
Thanks for that great video. As Sophia mentioned, I'm Emma. I'm the co-president of Protect Our Breasts here at UVA. And I'd just like to say on behalf of our whole team, I'd really like to give a huge thanks to Women's Voices of the Earth for leading this conversation today. We're so excited to hear from two of their amazing leaders, Jamie McConnell and Alexandra Scranton. First, we'll hear from Jamie, the Deputy Director. Jamie has worked in the environmental health field for 15 years. She led the effort to pass a law in New York that was the first in the nation to require disclosure of ingredients in menstrual products. And she organized a rally and lobby day in DC for menstrual equity that was covered in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Next, we will hear from Alex, the Director of Science and Research. Alex authors WEAVE's scientific reports on toxic chemicals and health, and has been tracking chemical testing of menstrual products conducted around the globe for years. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Jamie to get this conversation started.
Great, thank you. It's so great to be here. I'm super excited to do this presentation. I'm just going to share my screen, and I go by she, her pronouns. So let me share my PowerPoint here. So I think that video did a great job of just doing an overview of who Women's Voices for the Earth is. And just to provide a little more information, we look at several different consumer product categories. And these are areas that particularly impact women because of disproportionate use and therefore disproportionate exposure. So that includes safe cleaning, fragrance, salon products and cosmetics, and also intimate care products, which I'm going to be talking about today, in particular menstrual products. So there we go. And one of the things I was going to focus my presentation on or my talk on is what is menstrual equity. Menstrual equity can mean, there isn't one set definition. It can mean different things to different people. But generally it includes these ideas of accessibility, affordability, right to know what we're being exposed to in menstrual products, and the right to have access to safe products. And I would also include in that just destigmatizing the conversations about period, because that can be a huge barrier to menstrual equity as well. And so I'm super excited to see that there, are over 40 people on that presentation that want to hear more about, who want to be part of this conversation around menstrual equity. I think it's just wonderful. So those are kind of like generally when we talk about menstrual equity, that's what we're talking about. But really, like I said, it can be a very personal thing. How do you define menstrual equity? But the first kind of facet of menstrual equity is affordability. And there's been a huge movement in the United States to get rid of the tampon tax. So that's not just, it's often dubbed the tampon tax, but it's really about the fact that menstrual products are still taxed as a luxury item in some states. So I did a search. There's this really great website, tax-free period, where you can look up by state, which states still have tax menstrual products as luxury items. And Virginia is one of them. And in Virginia, lip balm is not taxed, but you have menstrual products are taxed. And when you think about that, it's like, it's not a luxury item. It's like toilet paper. Like when you get your period, you need something to control your period. You don't really have a choice. You have to buy these products. And I did a search and I didn't see that there's any pending legislation in the state either, but there has been a big movement in different states to introduce state legislation that would eliminate the tax on menstrual products, which is, one step towards more, affordability. The other thing that I think it's important to mention is that often like the safer products, and Alex is going to be talking a little bit more about some of our concerns of some of the ingredients that can be used in menstrual products, but often, those greener brands that might just be using 100% cotton, they're often priced more or they're priced higher, and they can be more difficult to find just in terms of accessibility, which I'll talk about in a minute. But our goal at Women's Voices for the Earth is that any person who menstruates, and I'm intentional when I say person, I want to be gender expansive to recognize that not everybody who gets their period, identifies as a woman. So, no matter who is walking into a store to buy, no matter what store you're walking into to buy a menstrual product, no matter what the brand is, no matter how much it costs, that it's not going to contain ingredients that may harm your health, and that you will have access to every ingredient that's used in that product. So that's really our goal. It's not about promoting certain green brands that is not a solution to the problem. It's really about making it accessible and affordable to all. The other piece of it is accessibility. So there's been, I don't know if anything's been happening on your campus. I think we talked about this maybe a little bit, but there's a lot of universities and public schools. There's this big movement now to get free products in bathrooms. And I should say there's also been a movement to get it not just in women's bathrooms, but all bathrooms. And the other piece of that is there's been a lot of conversation around free products in prisons and jails, because in some states, folks who are incarcerated still have to purchase menstrual products through the commissary. And if they don't have the funds, then they're often left to use, substandard devices to control their period. So there's been huge movement in terms of accessibility. There's been several states like New York have passed legislation that requires, free products in all public schools and in all correctional facilities. So we're seeing that in more and more states, that kinds of legislation being introduced. And on the campus level, I think this is really interesting and really cool. There's been a lot of movement at universities to get the university to provide these products free of charge in the bathrooms. So that's kind of when I say accessibility, that's what we're talking about, is just free access. Because like I said earlier, when you get your period, it's like when you go to the bathroom, you expect there to be toilet paper, right? When you go to your bathroom on campus, but there should also be that expectation that you can get a free menstrual product if you have your period and you need it. And then the other piece of that is just destigmatizing periods and how we talk about periods. There's still a lot of uncomfortability with talking about our periods and menstruation. We were, as one of the planning conversations for this call, we were talking about how, you still tend to hide a tampon in your pocket or a pad or whatever it is, or, being self-conscious of like opening the wrapper. I think there's even been products that they've marketed themselves as having like a quiet wrapper. So nobody knows that you're, God forbid that you're opening a menstrual, product in the bathroom. So, we recognize as we set out to do this work, we started our work on menstrual products in 2013. And when we started it out, and as the work has grown, we really realized this is one of the barriers to achieving menstrual equity, is the fact that there's still so much stigma talking about our periods. So to help break down that stigma, you can do exactly what we're doing. It's conversations like this that are so important. And Women's Voices for the Earth also has puts on workshops, our stories, our flow workshops, that really is about bringing people together to talk about menstruation, to break down some of those barriers. And so that's one of the ways we're addressing the stigma, but that's definitely a barrier to achieving menstrual equity. And then here's the piece that Women's Voices for the Earth works on, and that's right to know and right to safe products. Right now, the way our regulatory system is set up, companies that manufacture these products do not have to disclose what ingredients they're using in menstrual products that are going in and on our body. There are also there's no federal safety standard for menstrual products. That means that there's no standard that says you have to meet, your carcinogens can't be used in these products, or hormone disruptors can't be used in these products, et cetera. Like, there's no standard of safety, virtually no standard of safety that these products have to meet. And what we end up with, as Alex will be talking about, is chemicals of concern that can be found in menstrual products. So that's kind of the regulatory landscape. And that's, why we're doing the work that we're doing. It's focusing on increasing disclosure, increasing our right to know what ingredients can be found in products. And we do that by introducing state and federal policies, like what was mentioned earlier. I worked on a bill in New York that was the first in the nation to require disclosure of ingredients directly on the package of period products. But we also demand accountability directly to the companies. This picture of this person in a Tampax box was taken outside of Procter & Gamble's headquarters. So Procter & Gamble makes Always and Tampax, and we were protesting at a shareholder meeting because at the time, Procter & Gamble wasn't disclosing any ingredients that they were using, or virtually no ingredients that they were using in period products. And as a result of this, there wasn't a ton of people there. I think there was like 10 or 15 people outside this shareholder meeting. The company started disclosing ingredients. And I think that's one of the things that gives me hope. I always get a little nervous when I do these talks because I don't want people walking away with like, oh, what do we do? I'm just exposed to all these cancer-causing chemicals or reproductive toxins in my products. What can I do about that? I think one of the inspiring things of working for an organization like Women's Voices for the Earth is seeing companies respond to consumer or to demand. And to seeing like that progress with Procter & Gamble, it's just, it's progress, and it can't happen unless we raise our voices, which is what we're all about. And I should also say Kimberly-Clark has also started disclosing ingredients, and they make Kotex, which is also another really popular brand of menstrual products. And that's because of consumer pressure that's been put on them to increase disclosure. And so that's kind of the regulatory landscape of why we have the problem of harmful chemicals in menstrual products. Trying to think, I think that might be my last slide. Oh yeah, policy solutions, the most important slide. So there are a couple, especially as folks are thinking, what can I do? There's a couple things. You can support solutions on the federal level. Right now, we're waiting for this piece of legislation to be reintroduced. It's the Menstrual Product Right to Know Act. So that would be reintroduced on the federal level. So it would be, if passed, it would be a law that would cover every state in the United States that would require disclosure of ingredients in period products. Of course, there's legislation eliminating the tampon tax, and then policies. And this is really something that if you're looking to do something on campus, policies that require free products on your campus. And also not only free products, but procuring products from companies that fully disclose ingredients is really important too. And that's one way to kind of weave in the right to know aspect in that. So there are policy solutions. There are efforts on the federal and state level to increasing disclosure. And then, hopefully the idea is once we have a better sense of what we're being exposed to in these products, that we can then advocate for these products to meet a stronger safety standard. I think that's it for me, Alex. I can stop sharing my screen here.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to all the organizers. Here, I'll start sharing my screen of this great event. Really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we do with toxic chemicals in menstrual products. Kind of what do we know, and really, most importantly, what do we still need to know? Because there's a lot, unfortunately. And when we started this work in 2013 or sort of 2014, there were literally only 2 studies in the medical literature that looked at chemicals in menstrual products. So they looked for dioxins and furans, which are very toxic chemicals, and they did find them.
Yeah, Alex, sorry to interrupt you, but we can't see your whole screen.
Oh.
It's like half of the slide.
Oh,
there we go.
Is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Oh, see, I moved it thinking I'd be able to look at it. Sorry about that. I'll start again. Anyway, there were these 2 studies, which was the only studies that existed on menstrual products. They only looked for dioxins and furans. Both the studies came to the conclusion that this wasn't a problem, that this was negligible risk to our health. A conclusion I happen to disagree with, because there were a lot of things they didn't look at. But we found this to be sort of insufficient. We thought there's got to be more that we need to know about these products. So in August 2014, we did our own testing. We tested Always pads. They're the #1 market share in the US. Very popular brand. And we looked for volatile organic compounds. Now, we literally, quite honestly, couldn't afford to do dioxin testing. It was really expensive at the time. So we chose to do volatile organic compounds because you could test for 150 relatively toxic chemicals kind of with one test. We really had no idea what we were going to find. No one had done this kind of testing before. Amazingly enough, we found chemicals like styrene, chloromethane, chloroethane, acetone, toluene. These are really pretty potent industrial compounds, and really raise this question of what are these doing in menstrual pads? Like what, nobody knew that they were there before. No one had done this testing. When we asked the companies, they couldn't explain why these chemicals were gassing off of pads. And it really raised a lot of questions about what's this doing to our health? Why are they there? And what else is in these products? Now, since then, this actually inspired quite a lot of research around the world. So there've been about 21 studies that we know of, and probably a few more that we haven't caught yet, in the last several years, looking specifically at what kind of chemicals are we finding in menstrual products. So they've been done by government agencies, they've been done by media outlets, TV shows, magazines, et cetera, and nonprofit organizations. Largely outside of the US, this work has happened. The US government has not done any of this. And this website here, it's on our, if you just sort of Google the timeline of period product testing from our website, it lists all the different studies that have been done and links to them, so you can kind of see what that data is. We've sort of got it conveniently all in one place, and we update that. So what this testing is telling us is largely it's tampons and pads that have been tested so far. There is some research on menstrual cups, very, very little on period underwear. I think there's one study that we have listed that we know of. They're being tested in a variety of different ways. There's no standard for how you test these products. The way we tested it, we did what's called headspace testing, where you put the whole product inside kind of a container and leave it there for 12 hours and then measure what's in the air in that container that has gassed off from the product. Some other testing has kind of taken apart the pad and dissolved it, in something to find out what it's made of. So there are different ways of testing, and it depends on what you're looking for. What largely has been found in this testing, a lot of people have kind of followed our lead looking for volatile organic compounds, these VOCs, because they know they're going to find them. And this has been repeated in every test that's been done. People are finding these same sorts of compounds, particularly in pads, but also in tampons. People are still looking for dioxins and furans. These are very toxic chemicals, and they're still finding them, even though the industry seems to think they've solved that problem, but they're still there. There are concerns about pesticide residues, largely because there's a lot of cotton used in these products. Cotton, especially non-organic cotton, uses a lot of pesticides when you grow cotton. So there's concerns about that pesticide exposure from the menstrual products. And then most recently, the last few years, there have been a number of really good studies looking at phthalates. And phthalates are these plasticizer chemicals. They're reproductive toxicants. So really not a good idea to have in a product that has vaginal and vulvar exposure. But we don't know where these phthalates are coming from. Largely, the companies are saying we're not using them intentionally. It's a contamination problem, and we need to know more about why that's there. So it raises this question about sort of more sustainable and green products and what is the difference in this testing. And I would love to be able to tell you that we know that the green products are so much better than the conventional products, and in all these ways. A lot of the testing that's been done, that has been published, hasn't listed brand names. So sometimes it's really difficult to tell what kind of product is being tested and what kind of chemicals that they're seeing. One of the tests that Women's Voices for the Earth did, we did some follow-up testing on tampons in 2018, I believe it was. And we found a real difference between conventional tampons and sort of the green, 100% organic tampons. The difference being the conventional tampons, which are usually made with cotton and rayon, had a chemical called carbon disulfide. Carbon disulfide is a chemical that's part of the rayon manufacturing process. And women who work in rayon manufacturing facilities who are exposed to high levels of carbon disulfide tend to have menstrual irregularities and sort of issues with their fertility. So it seems like a pretty bad chemical to have showing up, in your tampon. So we didn't find that chemical in the 100% organic cotton tampons. There's no reason for it to be there because there's no rayon. There's no chance for that kind of contamination. There are also lots of other issues with sustainable and green product. I mean, with conventional products versus sustainable ones. Issues of plastic use. These are obviously single-use products much of the time, unless you're using reusables. The single-use ones tend to have a lot of plastic, and then there are a lot of companies who are looking towards these plastic alternatives and reducing the amount of plastic, which is a great thing. But we still need to know so much more about these. I mean, phthalates, for example, seem to be ubiquitous for all kinds of products. The question, of course, once you find these products is how is our health being affected? And the companies will tell you that it's not being affected, that these levels are very low, which they are generally, that we've been finding, but we don't know what they're doing to our health. The good news is there were these 5 major risk assessments done by 5 governmental organizations. So France, Sweden, South Korea, Switzerland, and Belgium did these kind of major studies. And they all came to the conclusion that there was kind of negligible impact for estimated systemic exposure from chemicals from using these products. Now, unfortunately, these studies, it's kind of a low bar. Basically, what it's saying is that when you use these products, the amount of chemical that will go into your body, sort of, go around your bloodstream, is unlikely to kind of give you cancer or some other major chronic disease. So these aren't products that are kind of killing us immediately. They're not seriously dangerous products, which is good news. It's good to know that. The thing is that none of these studies were able to look at kind of the more intricacies of how these products are affecting our health. So we don't know a lot about how we absorb chemicals through vulvar or vaginal tissue, for example. That's really important. It's not like regular skin. We know a lot about skin absorption, but vaginal absorption is a totally different animal. We don't know what happens when those chemicals are absorbed through the vagina or through the vulva, because there are some studies showing that when you absorb certain chemicals through your vagina, it goes literally straight to your uterus. There's like this preferential distribution to the uterus as opposed to going circulating around your body. That could be really problematic for some chemicals where there's this uterus exposure. We don't know what these chemicals are doing to our vaginal microbiome. This is the delicate balance of bacteria in your vagina that keeps it healthy. When you mess up that delicate balance, a lot of things can go wrong. It leads to a lot of infections and other risks of various diseases. There's impacts on epithelial integrity. That means kind of how good the vaginal tissue is, which can increase or decrease your risk of STDs, for example. There's fibroid development. This happens in the uterus. We don't know what these chemicals are doing to that. And there's always the potential that these chemicals are endocrine disrupting, meaning they're changing levels of your hormones. And of course, your reproductive system runs on hormones. Your menstrual system runs on hormones. You don't want chemicals upsetting that natural balance. So there are a lot of things that have not been taken into consideration in kind of these risk assessments that say everything's okay, which is why we're really still concerned about a lot of these exposures. So where do we go from here? We still need a lot more testing. The number of chemicals that have been tested for in these products is really small. There are things we haven't even tried testing for that we don't even know might be in there. So we need a lot more research. We really need to better understand absorption of chemicals through the vaginal route. That's super important. We need to eliminate fragrance from these products. A lot of the chemicals that we're finding may be associated with in scented products with these added fragrances, a completely unnecessary addition to these products that is just causing kind of this extra toxic burden from using them. So we need to get that out of there. We need to understand these manufacturing processes. Again, phthalates is the best example. We'd see some products that have really high levels of phthalates and other products with nearly almost none. So it seems to be a contamination problem, but what are companies doing right and what are companies doing wrong? This is what we need to know and better understand so that we can get all companies to have none of this contamination that might be impacting our health. And then lastly, we need to do better research on how period product use is affecting our health in other ways and what are the associations. There are a lot of things that we know about that are associated with people having their periods. But when you have your period, you're also then exposed to period products. So how much of your symptoms or your whatever impacts you may be having are due to the products you're using versus just the hormonal flux that comes with a period. These are some things that we need to know. So what can you do? And this is sort of following up on what Jamie was saying before. Conversations like we're having today, these sort of open and honest conversations about menstruation, make a huge difference. Once we can start talking about our periods, talking publicly about our periods, change can happen. So supporting these sort of events is absolutely key. Questioning the products that you're using. If you are having symptoms associated with your period, try something else. I mean, it's all, you can always try something for a month and see what happens. Anecdotally, we've talked to lots of people who have changed products and found really different results. Not realizing, I mean, a lot of people are really used to being kind of miserable for a few days during their period, but how much of that misery is coming from your product as opposed to coming just, from having a period. And there's certainly things that can just come from having your period, but questioning the products that you're using can be really useful. When you do that, contacting companies, this is so important. I think Jamie pointed out that we didn't even have that many people in front of the P&G protest, and it made a huge difference on the company. The calls they get, the emails they get, really, really important. They need to know that their consumers care about what's in the products. They care about how these companies are kind of establishing the safety of their products. We need them to know that you're concerned about the environmental impacts of the products that they're making, because that is what drives change. So your voices are incredibly important. There's always, a 1-800 number on the box or an email, and it's worth contacting companies. So these are just some ways to get involved with Weave if you want to know more about the work we do. We do have a particular period health newsletter. You can text period to 52886, and that will get you on our list. Otherwise, go through our website. You can share your story. You can attend, host, or lead an Our Story, Our Flow workshop. And I think we're working with the UVA folks, hopefully, to make that possible on campus. So that is my last slide. I will stop sharing. All right.
All right, thank you, Alex and Jamie, for those wonderful presentations. I think you both did a great job of sharing the reality of the situation, but also leaving us with a sense of optimism and excitement about continuing this conversation. So as we just learned, there are a variety of pros and cons to each menstrual product that we choose to use. But something that we do know is that menstrual cups typically have or leave a smaller environmental footprint given the lack of waste. So we have two brave students here today who are actually going to share a little bit about their journey to transitioning to menstrual cups. And since this conversation is geared towards students, we wanted to make sure to share a student perspective. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Helen and Hannah to give us a quick overview of their process, and then we're going to hand it back to Jamie and Alex for some questions.
Thank you so much, Leela, and thank you, both of you. I love the presentations, and it was definitely really great to hear about. Hannah, I'm Helen. I'm the treasurer of Protect Our Breasts, and this is my roommate, Hannah. So Hannah's just going to talk a bit about her journey, I guess, to start out.
Yeah, as Helen already said, my name's Hannah Boyles. I'm a third year at UVA, and I started using menstrual cups 5 years ago. The main reason I started using them was because in high school, I was becoming a lot more conscious of like my everyday environmental footprint. And I was trying to figure out ways that I could reduce the waste I was making in my everyday life, particularly with single-use products like tampons. And I was also concerned about, as has already been mentioned, about the chemicals in tampons. And I was trying to switch to an alternative that felt like safer for me personally. And when I first started, I was really hesitant to try. There was definitely a bit of a learning curve. And I think, especially at the time, like 5 years ago, there was a huge stigma around using menstrual cups. And I heard a lot of like people saying how gross it was, and people were really reluctant to try it. So I was quite nervous at first. But once I switched, I found that it was actually really convenient and like even better than what I had been doing before. One of the things I was really worried about was that it would be like leaking or feel gross, and that I would have to change it in public places like restrooms or at school. But that ended up not being an issue at all, because you can actually leave it in for a longer period of time than a tampon. So I could go all day at school with it in and not have to worry about it until I got home. And often I would change it in the shower in the morning or things like that, so that it felt like easier. And I also found that it was a lot more comfortable than tampons. Particularly in high school, I was a swimmer, so that was a really great solution because I could keep it in during swim meets and things like that. And it was just a lot easier, and I didn't have to worry about leaking or things like that. And now I think it's great. I've noticed that there have been like a lot more options in terms of size and like the different designs and shapes of the cup. So I think it took me a while to like try different ones and find one that really worked for me. But I really think there's an option out there for most people, and it's really a great solution for a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. So as I said, I'm Helen, and I'm one of the board members of Protect Our Breasts. And I sort of wanted to just talk in a broader sense about like, I guess what you can do or like how to start thinking about making the switch, because I know that, you know, being in a conversation like this, it's a lot of information to take in, and you might be left wondering like, where do I go from here, I guess. So Hannah obviously mentioned a lot of her reasons for making a switch to menstrual cups. I think a really important thing, at least for me, has just been having this kind of conversation, both within POB, but also just with my friends at school, trying to destigmatize the use of menstrual cups. So, you know, before I came to UVA, I didn't even know what a menstrual cup was. And I think I had sort of the reaction that Hannah might have mentioned, like, oh, I don't, like, that sounds cool, but it's probably not for me, you know, like, I don't really know what it is. And it's always been such a taboo topic, but I think that no matter what reason you're thinking about switching for, whether it's like environmental health reasons or just convenience, just maybe try talking about it with your friends. You might be surprised about like your friends using them already, or people being willing to learn. And of course, as Leela mentioned earlier, we will be handing out some menstrual cups via raffle at the end of this event. So definitely something to start thinking about. And, I hope this kind of unmasks some of the like taboo topics behind menstrual cups. So thank you. And I'm going to pass it back to Leela for our Q&A.
Thank you, Helen and Hannah. So now we do have about 15 minutes for questions for Jamie and Alex, or maybe even for Helen or Hannah as well. So we've had a few come through the queue. And Jamie and Alex, we have a number of questions about the tampon tax and why it exists in the first place. Can you give us a quick overview? I think I know probably why it exists, but can you give us a quick overview from a policy perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't really have the answer to the origins of the tampon tax in different states. I have a feeling, my feeling is that as they were writing up like the tax laws, the men were, they didn't consider that tampons were not a luxury item. And that's why oftentimes they are taxed, is because they're considered luxury items. So that I don't know the answer to that, but that's kind of what I think probably happened, because a lot of these laws have been on the books for a long time. But I would say the tampon tax issue has tends to get more bipartisan support than ingredient disclosure or safety, which tend to be a little more partisan. But definitely there's been the states that have passed, that have eliminated the tax on menstrual products. It's been done with bipartisan support, which is good. And I just want to say, Helen and Hannah, thank you for sharing your story. I've been using period underwear, which it's also a sustainable option. And I've been digging it. So that's my share.
I can just add what I know about tampon tax is I mean, it always seems that, it's called the tampon tax, but it wasn't like someone passed a bill where you're like, we got to tax those tampons, it was sort of more of a default thing. Like, there's sales tax and all kinds of things. And we're like, okay, well, we shouldn't tax food because that's a necessity. And then they add another thing, well, we shouldn't tax this because this is a necessity, but no one ever seemed to think, and largely male legislators, that, we should add menstrual products to that list of things that are necessities that shouldn't be taxed. So I think that's kind of how it came about. It wasn't, someone going after tampons, but more just not thinking about it and not wanting to even have the conversation, not even wanting to say the word tampon. So therefore it gets left out. That's, how a lot of legislation works, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alex and Jamie. And on the note of kind of not even thinking about the word tampon, I have to say, Alex, when you were presenting, I never thought I would find myself in a work context hearing the word vagina or vaginal. But I think that just goes to the initial point of the conversation, that why are these conversations so taboo? Why do we feel uncomfortable talking about them? Why am I stuffing a tampon up my sleeve when I'm walking to the So thanks for that comment. In kind of the title of this event, we talk about equity, and we got a question asking, how do you suggest people in lower socioeconomic classes put their health first while staying within a budget? What are some of the cheapest feminine care products that are non-toxic? Jamie or Alex, do you have any thoughts on this question?
I can try, and Jamie, feel free to it can be a tricky thing. I mean, certainly the brands that are telling you that they're healthier and safer tend to be more expensive. Certainly going the reusable route, whether it's a menstrual cup or reusable pads or, cloth pads or period underwear, they can be more expensive up front, but certainly cost savings tremendously over time. So that is one option. The other thing to think about, and this is something I think that goes with like kind of making these switches, because it is, I think, Helen and Hannah did a great job of sort of talking about that, discomfort at first, and, thinking about that switch, and is this icky, or is this, is this a weird thing? Is that, I think there are people who don't want to try the switch because they feel like, oh, well, then I have to do that all the time. And there's this situation where it'd be really much more convenient to have a disposable pad. Like, you can use a variety of different options over the course of your period, or over the course of the year, depending on how your life is. So you can try different products. If they're more expensive, you can use them part of the time, and use safer ones and then not safer ones. We certainly encourage cotton over rayon, and there are some that are 100% cotton that are organic and a little bit can be safer. Certainly going for fragrance free. Don't go for unscented products. Will take away a lot of the toxicity, and those tend to be equally priced. So that's it can be tricky, but I think it's a matter of being creative, trying some different things, and finding what works best for you.
Yeah, maybe I can just add, I mean, that's why we do what we do, is because there is an inequity in it, because right now the safer products tend to be, or even more sustainable products tend to be more expensive. And, as I said kind of earlier on in my talk, our end goal, we're not here yet, but our end goal and the work that we do is, so no matter what brand you're buying, whether it's Tampax or Natracare or 7th generation, if all products are required, and in order to require this, it requires policy changes. But we want all products to have to meet a safety standard. So not only do we want to see all ingredients, all intentional ingredients disclosed in the product, we feel that all products need to meet a certain standard of safety, so that it helps address the inequity issue. So no matter what store you go into buy a product, whether it's the bodega on the corner or Target or your supermarket, that you can buy a brand and just have that peace of mind of knowing it won't harm your health. But the unfortunate thing about it is the inequity. And that's not just with the period products. I mean, that's all the product categories we work on. I would say that is one of the real issues. And that's why we always try to stress that the solution is not buying your way out of the problem. It's not about switching to a 7th generation or a Natracare, because that is just not an option for a lot of people. And then I also think that's where the accessibility issue is tied in. Like, the more we can provide these products in schools, in public schools, which there's period poverty in the United States is a real thing in the United States. So as much as we can provide these products in schools, and on campus, university campuses, I think we can address some of that issue. And what I would like to see, I would love to see these institutions that provide products free of charge have a procurement policy. So like a purchasing policy, where they are supporting brands that fully disclose and that are just 100% cotton, and that are fragrance free. Like Alex said, fragrance free is kind of an easy switch. It just getting it, as long as it doesn't have fragrance in it, you're reducing the toxicity that could be in there by quite a bit. But I'd love to see, campuses, as they're providing more of these products, there's more of a movement to get them to use companies that are being responsible about what they're using and being transparent about it, because that will create a huge market shift. We know legislation takes a long time. It's not, especially on the federal level, it just doesn't, it can take years and years, which is why we don't just focus on policy. We focus on our corporate campaigns, where we're getting companies to do the right thing before they have to, before legislation or before a law makes them, they're just doing the right thing on their own. Yeah. So, and I encourage folks to sign up. If you go to our website, www.womensvoices.org, you can sign up for our action listserv, and you can stay up to date on ways to get involved with this issue.
Thank you, Jamie and Alex. I remember, so I also use a menstrual cup, and it has been a total game changer for me. And I remember something that I really struggled with was not only paying $15 every month, sometimes more than that, tampons, but also having the time to drive to a store or remembering to go get those products before my period started was always a really big struggle for me. So that's been really helpful in terms of my transition to a menstrual cup, is just always having the product ready to go when I need it. So on the topic of policy, we do have a question about advocacy efforts. So what can we do to convince our local and national politicians to update policy, such as Cuomo recently signing product disclosure into law? Do you have any templates we can use or share with our communities?
Yeah, I think, so our organization, we just work on disclosure, but there's the Period Equity is doing a lot of work on the tampon tax. So they're a great group to consult, like if you wanted to get something started in your state, and they would have model legislation that you could use. So for one of the things I'd like to create is like a toolkit. I have not done this yet, but a toolkit that folks can use in their own state to advance legislation. The thing that gets a little tricky, so we had the law in New York, which is great. It requires all intentionally added ingredients to be disclosed in period products. The tricky thing is, as more states introduce legislation, it's actually not something I've been wanting to see on a state level. I really feel like now we need to focus on federal legislation, because the more states you have introducing legislation, there's the risk that that legislation's not going to be great. And then that sets a bad precedent, which impacts us on the federal level. So for example, a law passed in California that we fought tooth and nail to strengthen, and we weren't able to do that, but an industry was really behind that. And obviously they have more resources than we do, but that's always my fear on a state level of getting more legislation passed. It would, in order to be beneficial, it'd have to like remain strong. So we're really focusing and pivoting to federal legislation. And, you know, we have a wonderful champion in Congress, Congresswoman Grace Meng. She's out of New York. She's been a real champion for menstrual equity, not just the right to know issue, but also access. She's done a lot of great things on the federal level. And so she's going to be reintroducing legislation this year, the Menstrual Product Right to Know Act. And she also has the Menstrual Equity for All Act, but which I don't think that's been reintroduced yet either, but it will be this year. And those are great ways to plug in to support those pieces of legislation. Because I mean, as you guys know, legislation, it's not going to move in Congress unless there are people speaking out in support of it.
Great, thank you, Jamie, for clarifying the difference between national and state policy. This is all very new to me, so it absolutely makes sense, your comments. So I think we have time for 2 more questions before we wrap things up. And there are 2 questions in the queue that I really love. The first is, what's a good way to engage your non-menstruating friends in conversations about period equity? So this is something that I am always trying to do, but I'm not sure I always have the right approach. Do y'all have any suggestions from an advocacy perspective on how to talk about this with folks who are not menstruating?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
It's a really good question. I don't think we've got resources on that. We have these our story, our flow workshops, and we've got some train the trainer tools and how to lead these conversations. But they tend to be for menstruators. So I think it's a really good question, and certainly very important that we get non-menstruating friends to be part of this conversation, because there is that discomfort there for people who don't menstruate and don't understand it, and therefore, and with the general stigma. So I mean, some of it is just having, starting the conversation and letting the other person see that you're not uncomfortable talking about it. I mean, that goes a long way. I mean, Lila, I thought it was funny you were talking about, not imagining, having a conversation where you use the word vagina or vaginal or whatever. When we started this work, I wrote a report in 2013 about intimate care products. And it wasn't until I was almost done with the report that I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to say the word vagina to a reporter, like out loud. And it was like, I've never had to do that before, and I was totally uncomfortable with it. And I got over it. But it is kind of this process, and once you hear someone else, talking about this very comfortably, it then becomes more comfortable. And I think it's being open to questions. I mean, if you don't menstruate yourself, and your sort of biological education has not been that great, which happens to a lot of folks, and certainly there's schools where the sex ed gets divided, and those who are not menstruating are learning something differently, and they're not learning about menstruation. So being open to admitting there are no dumb questions, and this is okay to to ask questions about it is one way to approach it. But there are certainly people not open yet to having those conversations, but the more comfortable you are, the more comfortable they will be, I think.
Any thoughts to add, Jamie?
No, I think that's good. I mean, and our stories are flow workshops. They don't have to just be for menstruators. I mean, we do encourage non-menstruators. It needs to be a safe space for people, but that's an idea, like, is to get some folks on who don't menstruate to have that conversation. Yeah.
And while we're on this topic, I feel like I have to give my father, who is on the call right now, a shout out, who has been very supportive and uplifting of having a dialogue with me. So thank you, Jesse, for being an ally. I know you're probably rolling in your grave right now, but just I had to say hello. Okay, the last question before we wrap it up. I don't know, Alex and Jamie, if you have the answer to this. Can we flush tampons down the toilet? What is the best practice in disposing of tampons?
I'm so glad somebody asked that, because I read that. I'm like, oh yeah, I used to flush tampons all the time so I forget if was it my dad or somebody. It probably wasn't my dad, because doesn't want to talk about periods, even though he has 2 daughters. But I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to flush these. I think I was in my 20s, like well into my 20s. But Alex, you probably have a note. But no, it's my understanding that you're not supposed to flush them, whether you're on septic or just like a sewer system, municipal sewer system. But right, Alex, because it can clog the pipes.
Absolutely, yeah, no, they do not dissolve very fast. I mean, if you get organic cotton, eventually they will, but there's definitely clog problems, and yeah, you should be throwing them in the trash. And certainly there are some I think that's been a problem also with pads. You definitely don't want to flush pads. It seems a little bit more obvious, but that happens all the time, and people lead to it leads to clogs and sewage problems. Wipes are another huge issue. We don't think you should be using wipes anyway, but sort of intimate wipes get used all the time, and those shouldn't be flushed either, because they're also just these products. Toilet paper does in fact kind of dissolve and break up really easily, but these other products don't. So yeah, totally great question.
I think that was a great question to end on. Hopefully that a lot of folks some clarity onto what we're supposed to do. But again, just furthering the argument for more of a dialogue around these topics. So with that, I will head into our formal wrap up. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I see that my internet is unstable, so I'll try to get through this quickly. I am going to pass it over to Emma Abraham, who kindly agreed to come talk about some resources from the Women's Center as a support space for individuals on grounds who want to learn more about what's available. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Emma.
Hi, so I'm an intern with the Women's Center, and the Women's Center offers a variety of support in different formats, including hosting educational events through our internship program, collaborating with student initiatives, and counseling services, all centered on the ways your identity influences your experience at UVA. So the Women's Center also offers a safe space to have deep conversations that grapple with issues of identity from a variety of perspectives, preparing students to address injustices and create a path forward. So in the follow-up email after tonight's event, there will be a list of relevant contact information and links to resources. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma. That brings us to the end of our event. I wish that we could stay on. I have so many more questions, but as Emma just mentioned, we will be sending out a follow-up email with all of the resources that we've mentioned tonight and some actions for folks in this conversation. So with that, I'm hoping my comments are going through. I see people freezing on the screen, but thank you all for tuning in tonight. All of the folks who signed up for the event will get the summary event email tomorrow. And we will also share the link to sign up for a menstrual cup, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we'll distribute those later on. So thank you all to our wonderful panelists. A special shout out to Jamie, Alexander, Helen, and Hannah for sharing their expertise and their personal stories, and for Sophia, Emma, and Emma for helping chime in and help organize the event. So with that, have a wonderful Tuesday afternoon. I hope everyone found the conversation informative, and I hope everyone feels inspired to continue it in their own spaces.